I've written about this before, but when I was a preteen young teenager, my family moved into a house. It started with hearing footsteps in the attic, which wasn't tall enough for anyone to walk around in. We attributed it to rats, but it made my grandmother uncomfortable enough that she stopped visiting. We started seeing things, a woman peeking around corners, a little boy running around, and the shadow of a man at the end of the hallway. My dad's bedroom was across the hall from my brother's room, and I often slept in there. Me and two of my brothers were watching a movie one night when I saw a man crawling on his hands and knees into the room. I thought it was my dad, who often did things like this to scare us. I gave the signal that I saw him and went back to watching the movie, expecting him to grab my little brother's foot. He was sleeping next to me. Then he opened his door, flooding the hallway with light. There was no one there. I've never been so terrified. My wife, girlfriend at the time, was sleeping over at my house. I was dealing with a bit of insomnia at the time, so I was lying awake in the middle of the night when I heard something fall from my computer desk. For whatever reason, it scared me enough to hide under my blanket. Then all of a sudden, I hear your typical horror movie heavy breathing right in front of my face outside my blanket. I'm pretty much frozen in fear listening to this breathing noise circling the bed, sort of. My wife starts to toss a little bit and then rips her blanket off to get up to use the restroom. She shuffles towards the end of the bed to get down, and next thing I know, she screams with so much terror and instantly starts to cry, saying there's a little girl sitting on the floor at the edge of our bed. My next move was I stood up on the bed and jumped off probably as far as I can make it towards the light switch. I asked what the hell she saw, and she just described seeing a girl in the fetal position looking fairly distressed look up at her when she was getting off the bed. I told her that I heard breathing outside my blanket right before she saw it, so needless to say that light stayed on the rest of the night. My mother has had a sixth sense since she was a kid and can usually sense spirits around that others can't, and used to see them in her elementary years. When I was 16, we moved into a shady apartment in Dallas, Texas. I kept having sleep paralysis, but something was off. Usually when I have sleep paralysis, I don't see anything or lay there for a couple minutes. When we moved there, I would see a shadow figure, and when it would look at me, I'd hear a loud, painful metal sound in my ears. The one I remember most was when I was sleeping on a couch and my parents' bedroom door was visible. When I woke up after seeing the figure, I looked over to my parents' room, wondering if I should wake my mom or not. They had the door open, and I saw the same darker than black figure looking at me, then duck behind the door. The next morning, I said nothing to my mom about the shadow before, and she asked me in the car if I have had dark things happen. I said why, and she replied, well, I'll sometimes feel something in that apartment, like all the negative things in the complex have been molding into one thing. Years ago, I worked at a Walgreens photo desk. A lady came in one day with an old black and white photo of her as a child. She said she used to tell her mom there were devils in the trees around her house, and her mom thought she just had a wild imagination and was making stuff up. She then showed me the photo of her, taken in the 60s, in a white dress and a pretty smile on what looked like a sunny day. But WTF, is that in the trees? It looked like demon faces all over and around the trees, on the bark, in the branches. Worst case of pareidolia love ever had. She wanted to make an enlarged copy and said she would give it to her mom to prove she wasn't crazy. That photo still haunts me. I work at a 14th century historic house. All kinds of weird stuff goes on, but the one that happened to me took place in the summer of 2018. I was alone on the first floor closing up at the end of the day. There was one other person in the building. In a room that has a reputation for ghost sightings, I was closing a room leading off it. I was struggling to lock the door as the bolt was stiff, so my back was to the room. There was a huge crash a few feet behind me, as if someone massive had hit the floor from height. The shake, and I could feel it through the doorknob in my hand. There's an old suit of armor in that room. The only feasible source of that crash was if it had fallen over. I spun around and the room was completely still and the armor was still standing. Spooked the hell out of me, so I got out of there as fast as I could.
Like, share, and subscribe. If you got videos or stories to share related to the paranormal, then do send them to us on this email.